Distributive property. Previously, we could represent integers using these small squares, and we could represent x, an unknown, using the rectangle tile. In this video, we're using algebra tiles to help us visualize the distributive property. Problem 1. 3 times parentheses x plus 5. The way I like to think of this problem is, I like to think of this in terms of groups and objects. For me, this problem is asking me, if I have 3 groups containing x plus 5, how many tiles am I going to have altogether? So let's go and start off with our objects. I'm going to add an x tile, and then 5 squares. So here I have x plus 5. Now I want to make 3 of these groups. So pulling the slider, we have times 2 times 3. And notice that I made 3 of the exact same groups. We have 3 groups of an x plus 5. 3 groups, and here's our x and 5. So how many tiles do we have altogether? Altogether we have 3 x's, 3 rectangle pieces, 3x, and 3 rows of 5. 3 times 5, we have 15 squares altogether. So our answer is going to be 3x plus 15. Problem 2. We're trying to make 4 groups, each containing a negative x and 2 negatives. Let's start with our objects. Negative x can be represented by a red rectangle, and negative 2 can be represented by 2 red squares. Now I want to make 4 of these groups. Right now we have 1 group, so it's 2 times 2, 3, 4. 4 rows containing a negative x and negative 2. Altogether we have 4 negative x's, 4 red rectangles, and 8 negatives, 8 squares. So the answer is going to be negative 4x minus 8. Problem 3. Here we're trying to make 2 groups, each containing 2x and 3 negatives. Starting with our objects, let's go ahead and make 2x, which is going to be 2 rectangles. And let's make negative 3, which is going to be 3 red squares. Now I want to make 2 of these groups, so right now we have 1 row, 1 group. Let's go ahead and double the amount of tiles. And altogether I see that I have 4 x's, and I have 6 negatives, minus 6. So our answer is going to be 4x minus 6. Problem 4. Negative 2 times parentheses 5x plus 1. Again, the way I like to think of this in terms of groups and objects. So we're going to have a group containing 5x plus 1. But you're probably wondering, what does it mean to have a negative group, negative 2? So we'll see what that means in just a second. Let's start off with our objects. I'm going to make 5 x's, 5 blue rectangles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to make plus 1, 1 blue square. And now let's just go ahead and make 2 of these groups. So if I made 2 of these groups, notice that I have a total of 10 x's. And I have 2 squares. But I don't want to make 2 groups, I want to make negative 2 groups. The way I like to think of negative is, I like to think of it as the opposite. So I want the opposite of all these tiles. Notice what happens when I make these into negative groups. What happens to the color of the tiles? When I made a negative group, everything inside the group became the opposite. So instead of having 10x, I actually have negative 10x. And instead of positive 2, I have minus 2. So our final answer is actually going to be negative 10x minus 2. Problem 5. In our group, we're going to have negative 4x and negative 3. And then we're going to make the opposite of 5 of those groups. So let's go and start off with our objects. Here we're trying to make negative 4x, which is going to be 4 red rectangles. And then minus 3 is going to be 3 red squares. Let's go and make 5 of these groups. Times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5. So right now we have minus 20x, and then we have negative 15. But I don't want just 5 regular groups, I want the opposite of these groups. So notice what happens when I try to make a negative group. What's going to happen to all these tiles once I make a negative group? Notice that all of these are going to flip over and be the opposite sign. So instead of negative 20x, I'm going to have positive 20x. And instead of negative 15, I'm going to get positive 15. So our final answer is going to be 20x plus 15. Problem 6. In our groups, we're going to have 3 x's and a negative 1. And we're going to make the opposite of 6 of those groups. So starting with our objects, let's go ahead and make 3 x's, which is going to be 3 blue rectangles. And then minus 1 is going to be 1 red square. And we want 6 groups altogether, times 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 of these groups. Now, I don't want just 6 regular groups, I want 6 negative groups. So what's going to happen to all of my tiles? When I make a negative group, all of these are going to flip signs. So all the positives return to negatives, and all the negatives return to positives. So after making negative groups, in total I have 18 red rectangles, negative 18x, and I have 6 positives, plus 6. So our final answer is going to be negative 18x plus 6. When we're doing the distributive property, we're trying to make equal sized groups of objects. So each object inside of the parentheses is going to get multiplied by our coefficient.